Hello there and welcome to my PvP unit analysis on Duane. In this video I'll be giving both factual information and decently educated opinions on Duane as a unit for PvP. I made this video mostly as a hobby and to entertain my friends and guildies, so I can hope anyone watching can become more educated on Duane if they are curious. Let's get started with a brief representation of his initial kit for his main job, Dark Knight of Remorse. Starting with the attack abilities, Rising Twilight is a single target attack with a short range, but lowers a target's dark resistance by 38% for 3 turns. This is an extremely good imperil for his own kit and any other dark unit in his party. They are very easily capable of capitalizing on that imperil. Darkness is an AoE attack with medium range and has a chance of disabling targets hit by it. It's pretty good. If their resistance to disable, obviously it won't be as good, but it helps that he has AoE options. Magic Infuse is a single target long range attack that not only removes auto raise buffs, it also removes 20 AP from the target. This is very good against opponents that have AP to lose or very reliant on their abilities. Death Scythe is an AoE attack with medium range that hits twice, life steals for 50% of the damage dealt, and it's a very good ability because if you took like initial first turn hit and you need to heal it back instantly, but you don't have a healer on your team or the turn order is not there yet, he will use it on his first turn, his LB, and heal it all back, or a good amount of it back. The more units it hits, it'll heal more. Dark Mantle is a self buff onto Duane that gives him a defense and spirit buff for 15, but it lowers his light resistance by 5% for 3 turns. Overall, until Sakura, the unit, comes out that can light imperil, the increase in returns on 15 defense and spirit is very good, especially if he's stacked up defense or spirit, or both. Atonement is both an AoE buff and a self buff. The AoE buff portion is granting slash attack by 40 to all the targets including himself, and the additional 20% defense penetration is only going to Duane himself. So since defense penetration is additive when combining it from different sources, such as his master ability, with this buff and his master ability he's able to hit 40%. So let's move on to his sub-jobs. Alright, so in my opinion, I think all 3 sub-jobs are actually very viable here. I won't go too far into detail on like every skill, and instead I'll just talk about like the purposes I can see behind each of the sub-jobs. So okay, to keep it simple, the sub-job for Dark Knight of Remorse is introducing the opportunity to receive more damage. And what I mean by that is it lets you survive a little bit longer. What I mean and how I see it is that by lowering the attack or magic of an opponent that you're hitting, you're able to take more damage. So by reducing the firepower of your opponents, you're able to survive longer. Because Magic Infuse on the main job also breaks the AP of opponent, it kinda will take the AI priority because it hits harder, so they won't actually use Sword Eater and Spell Eater as often as you might think. So especially on mages, if Spell Eater was used on a mage, it would significantly lower both their healing power, if they have any, or their damage output in general. But if you have that on and Magic Infuse for the ability toggles, Magic Infuse will take the priority and it'll break 20 AP from the mage instead and no magic down, meaning you'll still take more damage, they'll heal more as well. They'll only lose 20 AP, and for mages on average 20 AP is not too much unless that's literally at the last of their AP bar. So that's why I see it as you're able to mess around with it, but it won't be very high on the priority list. For Dragoon, I'll say not only is this like one of the go-to choices for live PvPers and like class match, because it has both Dragon Standard for mobility and horizontal jump to allow for some insane range if they're on the same height level. Because he has Swift Shadow as a passive that gives him +1 move, with Dragon Standard he could literally get 5 move 2 jump if he wanted to with only using 1 mobility passive. And it also helps him immensely if your opponent stacked up slash resistance. Dragoon having jump, it allows him to have piercing attacks, so his jump and horizontal jump. So it helps a lot if they stacked up specifically only slash resistance. Lastly is Viking, which I can argue is probably one of the most offensive firepower out of the other 2 Kneebreaker is alright, but it's Killing Axe and Rebellious Spirit. Because if Duane uses his Atonement for that 40 slash up and the 20 defense pen for himself, and then uses Rebellious Spirit after, he gets all of those bonuses: the slash attack 40, defense penetration 20, and the attack 40%. He gets all of that. And Killing Axe, even though it has short range, it is AoE and large damage, because currently I believe 100% of the units are all humans until like 2B and 9S come out, or other races if they introduce it. Killing Axe has a large damage multiplier, but with the added on human killer on it, 25, it literally makes it stronger than extra large abilities. So I would say Viking subjob is literally the one if you want to kill people fast, like boom boom. Moving on to the other factual information for Duane, we'll start off with his resist to damage. His slash, piercing, and magic resist are all positive, but they're nothing crazy. However, because you could boost it with vision cards and espers, it's not a problem. His negative resists, however, which are strike and missile and light elemental attacks, are something to consider, but not a big deal as of today's release date of the video, because there are no pugilist class, and the only alternatives would be monks or monk subjobs that don't hit quite hard enough to kill him, especially in one go. Maybe a 2-turn order or like a combo for it, but it's very situational, and most of the monk users are not. They do not have defense pen unless it's someone like Lucia. Anyways, along with that, missile resistance is only negative 5%. It's not too much of a negative stat, especially since he has so much defense. Most of the gunners have to go through that defense until there's a magical missile attacker, which is not out yet at all, not even in the Japan servers. It's not out, not yet, at least, until it is. There is a unit that does have 100% defense penetration, but we'll not go into that just yet. So all the gunners still have to have a requirement of having defense down or defense penetration. So that means Frederica is going to be a little too weak. Lucia and Luartha are going to be good against him, but like I said, he's still going to have defense, and he has a lot of HP. Gunners are not going to be too much of a problem for him as of yet. Since Duane is weak to light element, since he's a dark type, the problem here is holy, or taking damage in general from light element units, because the dark versus light element matchups, they're always a forever double-edged sword. So even with 5% magic resist, Duane will need to watch out for holy magic. So onto his resistances to status. Duane has a high resistance to stop and confusion, meaning without a limit break that has a base chance of 66.7% chance before fate values, he is tremendously difficult to stop or confuse, and it's impossible unless it's an LB. So for example, Agrius's Judgment Blade, it will never stop a Duane no matter what, unless you had some crazy stop res imperil. Even then, that does not exist at all in the game yet, and I don't think it will exist for a long time. But anyways, Judgment Blade will never work. However, Agrius's Limit Break still has a chance to confuse him, although it's not in her favor. Usually anyone else that she uses it on, outside of maybe like Warrior Light's innate 10% confusion resist, she has a very high chance of landing it if she has high faith. If not 100%, it is in the 90%. However, against Duane, it is much lower because he has 50% of resist to confusion. And his disable is at 10%, I almost said 5%, but 10%, which helps immensely because disable spams do happen in the game. Even Duane against himself can disable himself, but it's not in their favor. It's a much less percentage chance because he has at least a little bit more resistance to it. Some units like Runestorm or Orlandu have 50%, so they can't get disabled unless it's an LB, but 10% is better than nothing. It is very useful still. So let's move down to Duane's master ability. It is nothing to scoff at because it's the introduction of mono dark teams that can be buffed together with his Dark Imperil, which is one of the biggest key factors in his unit as a kid. This creates some like insane firepower teams that will be difficult to survive against if you're not built correctly against it, or if they're built very correctly. So as more mono element buffs come out for units, it'll only help Duane's position as a unit in terms of viability and like how strong he can be, especially such as the next dark unit for mono dark is Garville, I believe, and they can stack each other's dark mono team buffs. It'll be very good of a combo for that. For passives, Duane has access to 6 different passives, but I'll only go over the 3 that I would recommend or use or even mention, because about 90% of the occasions, like, you won't be using the others unless live PvP or very specific niche stuff. So I won't go over. So the first stuff is Swift Shadow. Duane gets a move +1, giving him a base 4 move now, and it gives him 5 hate. So he could take 3 separate turns of attacks before the hate wears off. And due to a good friend that tested it, and video proof of it happening as well, the hate does indeed refresh in round 2 for Guild Wars. So you can use round 1, like your hate could go down to 0, but round 2 it'll go back to 5 again. So this further cements my recommendation of that passive for Duane, because hate being able to refresh like that with no other abilities to like gain or raise hate is very, very useful, especially if it's on a passive that also gives you mobility. So Knighthood is simple but extremely effective because it's 15 plus 15. It's defense plus 15, not 15 plus 15. So Duane doesn't have like insane resistances like Warrior of Light and Thancred, who have like very high resistances or like low negatives, but Duane has more mediocre numbered resistances, as we can see, 10% slash, 15% piercing, 5% magic, but that's okay because he has defense. And stacking defense is also a very viable strategy because it forces your opponents to either have defense penetration or defense down debuffs to deal any meaningful physical damage to him. So it's almost a requirement if they stack it up too high. Your physical attackers will not do enough damage unless they're able to get rid of his defense or penetrate through. So last passive is Viking Lore. And I say this is a very good passive because it allows him to like capitalize on his high HP and attack already. It allows him to tank a little bit more because he has more HP, and it allows him to deal more damage because of the attack. However, you have to keep in mind, since Duane's resistances are not very high without proper setup, the extra HP from Viking Lore is not going to be as good as Knighthood in my opinion in terms of effective HP, unless you have a unit that can remove that defense or has defense penetration to make that defense stacking have diminishing returns. So reactive abilities, Duane has access to 2 sustain quote-unquote passives that can net some HP back, or straight up mid-range counter to magic attacks only. Very simple reaction abilities. I won't go too much into detail about it because I don't think they're too important. So this is going to be another lengthy part on Duane about his strengths and weaknesses, because I feel like it's kind of important to get that information out there for people to know. So we'll go off this. So first off, we'll start with his strengths. At level 99, max limit break, max awaken, Duane sits at 3.3k HP, almost 3.4k. He has 454 attack, 58 agility, and 8 defense. These are pretty good stats, especially the attack, despite not having any passives on, etc. His master ability also grants him 20% defense penetration, which is almost always useful in some shape or form in terms of just generality. His dark mono team buffs also boosts his already high stats, and it can also boost any dark units, which is the entire reason why he's out and he's very good in the current meta because of what he can do. So it makes his synergy with the dark units very strong. Most importantly out of all this, in my opinion, is that his passive refreshes its hate value in round 2 of Guild War, which is insanely strong, especially since that means he can capitalize on the free amount of hate he gets and just basically try to kill the opponent as fast as possible, and he doesn't have to worry about it on round 2 of like his hate diminishing because it will reset. This also allows for like insane flexibility in his ability usage and vision card setup. Like he doesn't have to have like taunting spell on, taunting blade, he doesn't need vow of love, he can just have it, and it gives him mobility of 4 as well, which helps it in the current meta arena map because mobility is kind of important. So his resistances to stop and confusion also give him a favorable matchup against Agrias. He's not a straight up counter, but it's a favorable matchup for him. So his relevant resistances also give him, like, in our current meta and future viability with flexibility, because his resists are pretty good, because they can always be boosted by vision cards and espers going to like which side you need more. Obviously he'll struggle a bit if he like stretches out too far, but until that actually needs to happen, it's pretty relevant. With the Dragoon sub, he is also able to use both slash and pierce type attacks, so technically he's not only slash, even though most of it is. And lastly, and most importantly in my opinion, is that, well, besides the Swift Shadow, is that he is the only dark unit out there that has Dark Imperil at negative 38%. That is very strong. It is like a Gilgamesh's Kotetsu, basically, for slash, but for dark. So before we head into weaknesses, we'll just talk really briefly about his equipment itemization. He uses swords such as Nagrarok or Lazalia Royal Guard Sword, which I would recommend because of the accuracy, because he does not actually have good accuracy. He can use armor and helmets like the signature platinum armor for like a lot of generic uses, or the helmet for slash resistance and spirit. He's also able to use these as illusionary bells. However, sadly, he is not able to use Oldoa's apron, which means he's unable to get to 70% defense penetration. It is not possible for him unless there is a new item that comes out. So let's get to his weaknesses. Since it seems his strengths are overwhelming, and I'll break down like the weaknesses so that it feels like he's not too OP, I guess. First things first, not a problem for whales and krakens, but he is a double cost unit and he's limited. Regardless if there's free shards or not, it is still a double cost unit and is limited, and it will only come out after his reran, after his current release. Next up, Duane has no spirit. He will get crushed by like spell blades if he's not built correctly against it. So he'll take heavy damage from spell blades, rune knights, and magic itself in general without proper itemization, even with 5% magic res. He has to build up that magic res. So for his passives, without the mobility passive or like jump 1 or swift shadow, Duane has like, he has mid-range abilities on his attacks, but it can take him some time to get to places if he doesn't have his move 4 or jump 2. It's for all units like this. They have mobility issues, but usually there is something that helps mitigate it by having long range. But he doesn't. He does have a decent range skills, but it's not to the point of others. So he's weak to both strike and missile damage, which is not too much of a concern, as I said right now, until later down the meta, once we get pugilists and snipers that can also pierce 100% of defense. So for now, Lucia and Luartha are decently good DPS against him, like with their defense penetration. For now. Duane is a dark unit, so he is weak to holy even with his 5% magic res. I said this before, but he has to somehow get spirit or more magic resistance, or he can melt pretty fast. Like, even if he has the positive magic res, he has to build off it. That's what makes it like both good but also like a bait. It is not enough, but it gives you enough to build up if you do. So almost 90% of his main and sub jobs attacks are all gonna be slash oriented. Without Dragoon sub as a sub job, like if you don't use it, he will be literally 100% slash oriented, meaning Duane is forced to use either Igaion, the vision card, or the Exorcist Halloween vision card, and that means he's very easy to counter against as a unit himself. Obviously not like as a whole as a team, but as him himself. Slash resistance is very effective against him. So since Duane's bulk is in his HP and defense, this means that defense penetration and debuffs are highly effective against him, such as like Ruinstern, Venera, or Landu. They are very good against him because they have defense downs. Those are very relevant. So if you want Duane to tank, you are literally forced into using Swift Shadow or Vow of Love. Since he doesn't have an ability, as I talked about before, you have to have it on either his passive or vision card slot. This also means that since he only gets 5 hate, compositions that have like heavy defenses and only sustain, they will burn his hate pretty fast and like kill the rest of his teammates. Since his hardest hitting abilities or enabling abilities such as Rising Twilight for the Dark Imperil are all single targeted, teams with like the Odin Vision card or Agrius will take less damage overall from Duane, and like not allowing him to set up his team for more damage or himself for more damage as fast as he could, and he'll be forced to use his AoE abilities unless you toggle that off specifically. So his dex and luck stats are nothing amazing, which makes evasion teams make a mess out of Duane. They'll literally run laps around him, especially with how he only has 5 hate on his passive. The evasion teams will like get through it very quickly. Also, as stated before, he doesn't have any 100% hit abilities. This is unfortunate for him, so evasion teams are very effective against him. And lastly, since he cannot use Oldora's apron as stated before, he himself is also weak to very high stacked defense units. And yeah, it's kind of ironic because at least he can get to 40% with Atonement, but he himself cannot get above it without new external ways. As of right now in our current meta, as of today, it is not possible. So Duane's role as a unit lies in 2 categories. It's either as a DPS / bruiser or a tank. I thought about support because of Atonement, but that's literally all he has. It is not enough to be considered as support. He is not a support unit. So anyways, his stats and his kit allows for very good synergy between a tank and a DPS / bruiser because he can dish out a lot of damage and be beefy enough to take damage because he has hate and he has beef. Or he can help set up his team because of Dark Imperil, or dark units in his team can also chain off him very well. So he sets up his team or he's able to deal a lot of damage. He has both options at the same time. Anyways, on to the next topic is the current guild map war and the arena map and the class match. So the current meta of December 25th, Christmas Day in 2020, the current guild war and arena map is the Snowy Mountains. This increases your area of effect, resistance, and accuracy. So Duane does not have to worry too much about evasion comps here or his low accuracy. This map does, however, allow Agrius to be one of the most prominent units because she's able to stack up her weaknesses of the area of effect attacks and her innate single target resistances. She probably is the best unit in this map for tanks right now. So Kayn and other 2 jump units that have mobility, such as like also Halloween Leela, they're able to pass through the middle of the map, so it's able to like target backline units more easily unless a tank is already out on the front. So Kayn is very effective here as well. Both Halloween Leela and Eldria have instacast heals, long range magics, and their supporter kits help the front lines a lot, so they are very useful in the current meta as well. I will say, since H. Leela does have Shikuchi, I would give it to her. However, Eldria's her LB can allow the first tank unit, especially if it's slow, to go out much faster. It's also more safer in a way. So I mean, they're arguable. I think they're very interchangeable, but they're also both very, very useful in their own way. So you would ask, how well does Duane do against this meta? Well, his stop and confusion resistances are favorable for his matchup to Agrius, who is very prominent in his much higher PvP elo. There's no guarantees though that Agrius doesn't confuse him. It's up to RNG for that because it's in LB. But Duane does have innate 15% pierce resistance against Kayn's that are there, and he has good defense. So Kayn can't like kill him as fast as other units that he usually does. Like usually 1-2 hits, he'll probably have to do 2 to 3, maybe 4 even if it's that Duane is very defensively built. But since Halloween Leela and Eldria both have heals, Duane's gonna be topped off. Ironically, also both math girls also have access to AoE holies, and the map resistances options can also help Duane even more, because Duane, he's not tanky against magic unless you build him that way, and he does take damage to holies, but because there's AoE resist, that holy won't deal as much damage as it could be against him. So for live PvP and class match, I won't go into detail here because it will take forever, but it's the same as Season 2. This means the stupid Quicken, Haste, Evasion cheese will be extremely prominent here, and since class match and live PvP is very fast, as I said before, I won't go into detail, but There are many units that are viable here, but I just put most of the ones that I saw in Diamond Masters while I was climbing in Season 2. But Duane, specifically, since this is about him, I think he is very viable for a live PvP, mostly because if you go the Dragoon sub on him, and he has his limit break that can heal, he can run Dragoon and Swift Shadow, which gives him literally 5 move and 2 jump. That makes him extremely mobile for how tanky, well beefy I should say, and how much damage he can do. I do believe he has very high potential here. So you have Duane and you want him to put him to use. Great! There's multiple ways to build and gear your character, so I won't go too in depth on exactly what you should be doing unless you want like a sample build. But anyways, since unit and team building is one of the greatest things in War of Divisions, it seriously makes me happy when like making new builds and stuff, so it's ultimately up to you how you want to build your unit. However, I will offer advice, etc. So regardless, there's 2 simple paths for Duane to take, is in my opinion to capitalize on his defenses or to raise his damage and defenses at the same time. Like it's kind of like a generic thing to say, but I really do mean it, because the more survivability he has, he's able to apply his imperil and live longer, since dead units don't do damage, they're dead. So it allows you to get as much usage out of him at the same time. So also, for the first 6 units, like I could think off the top of my head that pairs well with him, I put here as their portraits is Kane, Venera, Ruin Stern, Ildria, Ayaka, and Leela. Like the bottom 3 are not only they open up magic type attacks into the team, but also are able to keep Duane alive because they can heal him. For firepower, as I said, Kane, Venera, Ruin Stern. I do believe they're very good because they're able to benefit off Duane's mono dark buffs, and because they can all chain off each other as well due to the element and Dark Imperil. I do believe they are very strong. Like obviously there are other units that can like work with him very well, but these are the first 6 I thought of. If I went through every single unit, this video would never end. I'm sorry. Now, for fighting against Duane, since the audience for this video can range between new players to people who randomly pulled Duane, to people who never got Duane and have to fight against it, or to old veterans in very top guilds, I'll try to compromise between and go with a more general explanation. Duane's weakness is defense penetration and defense down buffs. That is the true fact. Like, because his resistances are not super high, he has to rely on what he has, which is high base HP, or HP in general, and defense. So remember, Duane is a dark unit. This also means light units in general will always have a damage advantage hitting him, but as of right now we don't have Sakura, we don't have Yuna, we don't have El Sorel. We're lacking a lot of like the light unit firepower, so it's not always going to be like more damage against him. So obviously stacking slash resistance against Duane, because he has 90% slash, is very effective, and obviously because he is not the only unit on his team, it's not always going to be 100% effective, but it will be effective against him as a unit as a whole. Dark resistance and slash resistance, those will be good against him. Also additionally, since he is unable to use Oldoa's apron, you can stack defense yourself to a high amount, because he can at max reach 40% defense penetration and 20% on average. Especially if we're talking about auto, it won't always be 40%. So Duane has also low accuracy. Like I said, you can abuse this. Evasion units will run laps around him. I've said this before. Evasion units will be very good against Duane, probably after this map. As of right now, since the accuracy boost is there, it won't be as good, but you get the point. Lastly, if you literally have nothing I said before, which is really unfortunate, I can only really recommend resorting to status elements. I guess you could slow him, or you could steal heart. I will say steal heart is definitely RNG factor. It can work on a majority of units, not on Agrius, but it does work on Duane. Since he has a 0% res to it, he will have the same amount as most other units. If you do steal hard him, you have a high chance of winning, because he will probably destroy his team on the other side, which is it will be in your favor, but I mean, you could say that for many units, but that is an option there. It is an option. So these are 6 units I picked out that I believe are pretty good against him or have a favorable matchup, only based on what I said before. So basically, Cecil, I thought about monks or pugilists. They're just not many viable ones. I will say Cecil is probably the highest attack monk sub-job user that's light as well, that can take advantage of that. But because he's not able to use Oldo's apron either, and he doesn't have any defense pen, a defense stacked Duane will just laugh at his attempt. I'll be honest, like, there's no defense pen. You have to use defense down somewhere there, or Cecil won't do enough damage to him. However, if he did not stack defense, that means Cecil will literally, like, he's not gonna one punch him, but he will put a heavy dent in him if he does not have defense stacked for that. So also Duane, because he does not have any spirit at all, he can still take heavy damage from Ramza's ultima and spellblade attacks, as well as from Rune Knight's spellblades. So those are all also viable options. This does change, however, if he does get more slash resistance, but in general, without slash resistance or spirit, Ramza would be one of the number ones, I would say, that can deal damage to him with spellblades attacks. I put Orlando and Runestone here mostly because they have defense down debuffs and they're pretty unique to it because there's not many others that have it. Weirdly, everyone has either defense pen or something else, but yeah, those two can lower his defense. That can make Duane much more significantly squishier and could like put a dent into his survivability on his defense. Lucy and Luartha both have defense penetration and they hit hard enough to make Duane like take damage. It is only negative 5% missile res, like I said, but the defense penetration helps immensely. Like, it will help keep good damage. I will say though, Luartha probably has a way higher chance than Lucia of dealing damage because she has options of self-sacrifice, but that is pretty much the story, the defense pen from both of them. So honorable mentions, although I only picked 6 here and I didn't mention any for fighting as Duane, but units such as like Halloween Ryu or Howlet can also deal a lot of damage unless he has slash resistance, as I said. But that's a different story. So also, if people just want to see like sample builds of Duane as a tank, or using tanks against Duane to like tank against him and his compositions, I'll post some sample builds below in the description box for people who are just curious to see. But yeah. Before closing out, I want to talk about the future of Duane and his weaknesses and matchups in the future, possibly. Since this is all projected in the future though, I won't go too much into detail. I'll just mention the unit names and like what they'll do. So first off is Yuna and Sakura. Both are prominent light magic users and they will do well against Duane without like proper setup. Unless he has high magic resistance, he will die to them. And Sakura does have light imperil. He is in trouble there. So El Sorel, she has innate defense penetration, but she has access to light missile type attacks, which can hit Duane's weak spot of the negative 5% missile res. It is still relevant, but she does hit hard too, so it's still there, that option. So the final 3 to think about in matchups, I will say, are the defense penetration pugilists that are out in JP right now, but not right now for global. And that is Lardo, Xmas Venera, and Aron. So Lardo's limit break reduces strike res by 38%. So if Duane got LB'd by Lardo, I just have to say he's probably dead. Maybe 1-hit KO even. Like, negative 38% on top of a negative 15% strike already is very, very hard to mitigate against. Especially with Lardo, he also has defense penetration. He will take a lot of damage. Xmas Venera and Aron both have pugilist jobs and their innate defense penetration. Aron being able to hit 60 to 100% defense penetration as well. They will hit Duane very hard. There are also other units outside of these 6 that can go against Duane, but these are like 6 units that came to mind, I guess, first, or that might be popular, who knows. But they are there for Duane's weaknesses in the future matchups. Anyways, if you stayed long enough to get to here, thank you very much for watching and listening. Hopefully I was able to help you in becoming more knowledgeable about Duane and PvP or as a unit as a whole. Merry Christmas to you all and stay safe. If you have any feedback or inquiries for me, please leave it in the comments and I'll read it probably after this, and goodbye.